Hi. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight's topic that we're going to talk about is how you can be empowered and bring choice back into your home and make the best choices and decisions for you and your family. We're kind of living in crazy times, and so we just wanted to offer up how we do things in our home as means to encourage you and give you confidence to make choices, even if they're against what mainstream tells us we should do. Do whatever choices you make, that you do them with a confident, empowering voice and force within yourself. So maybe just to kick it off, we can give our little stories on how we got into this natural, holistic lifestyle that we both live. You want to go first?
Sure. My name is Gustafson. We grew up eating vegetables out of the garden, venison. We weren't allowed to eat fast food. We lived in the country, no pop. So we grew up eating pretty healthy. We exercised. When I was in about my 20s, I met an older guy in Mexico when we were going on vacation there that had used to live in the U.S. He was given a death sentence here and was told there was really nothing he could do. They could do some things to him, but he wasn't going to make it. And he thought, well, that doesn't sound great. So he ended up moving to Mexico, doing some cleanses. Eventually had a clean bill of health, had the insides of a 20-year-old when he was in his 80s, and we would see him every year, and I thought, you know what, that's what I want to be like when I'm in my 80s. He always talked about how in the U.S., as people get older, all they talk about is what pills they're taking and what their ailments are, and I had, when you start thinking about it and looking around, that is what you hear a lot about, is people complaining about their health. And I decided at that point in my early 20s to take control of my health and make sure that I didn't end up that way. And then once you start down the rabbit trail of natural health, you just find so many different things that now, having found Young Living 5 years ago and creating a healing home and a healing barn for our horses, it's just all fit really well into our lifestyle, and brought Kellie and I together. And so we just wanted to share some things that we do with you.
Yeah. Our system does really feel like here, and I can't compare it to other countries, but it really does feel like sick care versus health care. Everything that we have seems to fix symptoms, but not the root cause of the issue. And so, so that's where we just, my story started about 13 years ago. I was a pretty conventional mainstream life. Like, I think back to my habits, and they weren't the healthiest, and it's crazy to even think, I used to have a Mountain Dew a day. So not only did I drink pop, but I drank Mountain Dew. Like, that's, wow, the heavy stuff. And so I had at least one bottle of pop a day, ate candy bars, snack food, junk food, Pop-Tarts for breakfast, all of this stuff. And not to say that those things can't be enjoyed in moderation, but the lifestyle that I was leading was just very, very heavily processed. And so anytime you're eating processed foods, obviously you're not going to have a great health. I was fortunate. I was young when I was doing it, and it hadn't caught up with me at that time. And so when I met my now husband, he was going to school and wrapping up his doctorate for chiropractic school. And we had just gotten a puppy together after dating for a few months. We didn't live together or anything, but we shared our dog Winston, and we had arguments about vaccinating him or not. I was very pro, and I was just this is what you do. You vaccinate your animals, you vaccinate your kids, you get vaccinated, all of these things. Like, that's what you do. Here I wasn't going to say that word, and then I say it. I want to say the V word. But anyways, I don't want us to get censored. And so I ended up taking our dog to the vet behind his back and getting him vaccinated. And again, of course, we had another nice little discussion / argument, probably a full-blown fight about, and rightfully so. I mean, oh my gosh. And he's still, to this day, our dog is 12 years old, and he still has a little fatty tissue area right at that injection site. Like, I just and he's good, and he's still okay. But so that just really started a little bit my mind going. My husband had brought home a PowerPoint presentation that he was learning about in school, and it was very fact-based. It was very much things that I had never seen from a different perspective, but with some really solid hard facts. And so I read that, and then I just it piqued my interest, and then I kept questioning things, kept looking into things, and it just snowballed and kept on rolling until we were married. I got pregnant and had a very natural pregnancy outlook. We sought a midwife for our care. I enjoy the midwife model of care versus an obstetrician if you're a low risk person, which I was a low risk pregnancy, so I just enjoyed that. We went for a home birth. And all of these things that I was researching and digging into, I didn't feel comfortable sharing them with other people because it goes against the norm. And I felt like I'm a people pleaser by nature, and so I don't like conflict, and I just didn't want to ruffle feathers. And so I would always get by with, just nodding and smiling when people would say things. But once you become pregnant or have a baby, people ask a lot of questions, and sometimes they're pretty invasive, and people wouldn't in any other circumstance ask you such invasive questions, I feel like, but pregnancies just bring out just some doozies. And so people I couldn't hide the fact that I was crunchy and natural minded anymore, because people would just come out and say, well, who's your doctor? And there's no skirting around it. I don't have a doctor, I have a midwife. Oh, you have a midwife, and then the questions. And so I would be telling complete strangers about the birthing tub I had and all of these things that were part of our plan. So there was no hiding it. And then once our babies are born, then of course that brings in more questions. And again, people like to have opinions, and they like to project those opinions onto people. And so what I wanted this space to be, and what we wanted this space to be, was just a safe place that gets those questions going in your brain, helps you ask those questions of risks versus benefits for everything, from cleaning products you have in your home to the food you eat to different things you agree to and say no to for your babies and your births and your well checks and all of these things. We'll just have a place to know that you can ask any question you want to. And so we wanted, so we just wanted to have that for you guys and help empower and create confidence. So as you are making choices, it doesn't matter if they're the same choices that we've made, or if it's way different. We still respect everybody, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make the best choices for our family. And our goal is to have a healthy family, healthy kids. And we all come about that in a different way. And so, I think that's a sum up of my story. I can kind of roll into some of my birth experiences. So as I mentioned, I prefer the midwife model of care. I feel for me, it's a little bit more proactive and focuses on nutrition and being active throughout pregnancy. I found that prenatal appointments were literally just going and chatting. I remember one prenatal appointment where we just talked about how we were moving. We bought a new house. We were moving, the stress of moving. That was my appointment. We didn't, and of course, she measured my belly, but that was it. We just really focused on life. She focused on keeping my mindset, if I did help with moving, how to eliminate stress, so stress wasn't on the baby. We just spent an hour talking.
This was with your midwife or a regular doctor?
This was with my midwife.
Okay.
Yeah, so the course of, I have three babies. There we go. 3 babies. I've had 3 different midwives and 2 obstetricians for those 3 births. And so, my prenatal care, I always like to do the midwife. And they also, of course, seem to be open to discussing options, and not as much of, well, this is what we are doing. So it seems a little bit more receptive for me. Where else my train of thought? So with those pregnancies, we had a lot more options. So we were asked, and this is how I feel like, had I not had a midwife, I may not have realized that these things were actually options in my decisions to make. And so that's another reason why we wanted to share this, because so many of these things, I think they're worded in ways that if you don't know, and you may not realize that they're your choices, you're just going to go along with it because that's just how it is. And it's hard to buck the system sometime. And so we just really want to equip and empower today. But things like ultrasounds, for our first baby, didn't have any ultrasounds. Again, we were going for a home birth with our midwife. And so, yep, we had no ultrasounds. And what I felt was that really brought me back to my own intuition. It brought me back to really connecting with my baby on a different level than if I would have gone in and gotten to see through the ultrasound, yep, everything's okay. Like, by doing that, that kind of gets rid of that necessity of like, I really do need to tune in. And so I didn't have ultrasounds with that one, and my second and third ones, I did have one ultrasound each pregnancy, but I set parameters for my second one. We did it as late as possible. We had one ultrasound. We did it at 36 weeks. And the only reason that we did it was to make sure that the placenta, I had a C-section with my first baby, and so we had to make sure that the placenta didn't adhere to my scar tissue, because in that case I would have had to have an immediate, or I would have for sure had to have another C-section. And again, I was trying for another home birth. And then with our third baby, we had one ultrasound, and I think we did it around 20 weeks, but I gave specific parameters, and my birth team and labor team were on board with having those parameters. And so I just said, 15 minutes max for this ultrasound. They passed it along, and the ultrasound tech was so amazing and so accommodating. And so those things are out there. They're options for you to do, and sometimes we just don't know. Another thing that sometimes comes up is our cervical checks, and that's before, both while you're in labor, you can decline them, and in those prenatal appointments. For me, I didn't see a benefit personally to them, because women are so different, and every pregnancy is so different, and every birth is so different. So some women might be dilated to a 1 for 3 weeks, and some might go from a 1 to a 10 in an hour. I mean, you just don't know. So to know what you're dilated at 39 weeks isn't a good telltale sign for me, good enough to warrant having those done. Had I not known that that was an option to decline, I probably would have went through with them, because I had those discussions with my doctor. But during one appointment, her nurse just came in and said, okay, like, get under the sheet here. The doctor's going to come in and do your cervical exam. So I had to say, you know what, we're not doing those. And, she was like, what? Oh, she didn't know. She thought we were, just because she assumes that everyone does. And so, yeah, so sometimes those things can be presented as a statement when really they're questions, and you have the power to research and ask questions. That's what that care team is there for. It doesn't have to be quick appointments. You ask those questions, why are we doing this? What happens if we don't do this? And just keep asking those questions until you feel comfortable one way or another doing what they are. Another experience that I had was, after our first baby was born, I had my 6-week post-op appointment, and the doctor told me that she would let me try vaginally one more time, and if I couldn't, then that was my last time. And I was just like, no, like, you don't get to tell me that. I've definitely done some mad research on VBACs, and in every instance, I have found VBACs after any amount of C-sections always points to a safer opportunity, or safer alternative than having repeat C-sections. C-sections are major surgeries. And again, like, those are choices that everyone has to make on their own. But for me, that just wasn't something I was willing to risk. And I knew, like, our bodies are amazing, and they know how to have babies. And sometimes the more intervention we have and the more pressure we put on them, that's where more intervention is just a cycle of intervention, because we're not allowing our natural processes to happen. And that all being said, C-sections are needed sometimes. There are definitely times when that's needed, when medicine is needed. All of these things are such important things in our lives and to have available to us. It's just what order do we do it in? Do we go to that medicine alternative or that medicine route right away? Or do we try a couple other things and try to heal things? And then when that doesn't work, try the medicine. And likewise, obviously, if I get in a car accident, I'm not gonna try homeopathy to heal my leg if it's broken and dangling off to the side. I'm gonna go to a surgeon and get it properly reset. And so everything has a place. Yeah, so VBACs. After our first baby, another decision we personally made was we evaluated the vitamin K. That's a standard one that everyone's presented with. And a lot of times, if you don't know that's an option, they just do it. Like that just happens right after the baby's born. We had brought that up from the get-go that we did not want that. We actually had a pediatrician tell us that if our baby died, that was on us, which as a new mom at the time, my first baby, that was, we're exhausted. I just had a C-section, which is a major surgery, all of these things. And so that was just really tough to hear. And if you don't know, you can definitely waver on your confidence and second guess yourself and wonder if you're making the right choice. And so back to that empowerment, just going in with a level head and knowing that you are the expert, knowing that these are your choices to make for your family. And you can definitely have those discussions with people, but in my opinion, then they better tell you why it's needed with some pretty hard facts and not just say, because a lot of times I've heard people, they don't get necessarily the conversation they want. They're just kind of told like, you do it. And sometimes that's not good enough when it comes to our families. Another thing during pregnancy, gestational diabetes screening, weighing those risks and benefits. That orange drink, you may not feel, I personally didn't feel like that was worth the risk drinking that to not do a screening because I wasn't in a high risk category. And again, I was working with a midwife. And so from the get-go, they really focus on nutrition. And a lot of times, not all times, but a lot of times these issues arise in pregnancy due to either nutrition or lack of mobility and exercise. And so I worked with my midwife on discussing if I was in those high risk, and we both agreed that I wasn't and that we didn't need to do it. So I have declined that with 2 babies, and one I did a jelly bean test, and you just have to eat 10 jelly beans within I think a minute or 2, and then they test your blood, which I probably would do anyways, and just eat. Who doesn't want to eat jelly beans? Although they were the real jelly beans. I like the Starburst jelly beans. So, but anyway, so there are so many options out there. There are so many, even honestly, prenatal vitamins. I didn't take a specific prenatal vitamin. I took the same supplements I took when I wasn't pregnant, and maybe I would add like an omega if I wasn't taking one at that time, just to increase those fish oils for some brain development. But otherwise, I didn't take a specific pregnancy vitamin. Instead, I just supplemented my body like I normally did. Not eating during labor, that's another common thing. You liken it to running a marathon. You wouldn't run a marathon and not supplement your body with nutrition along the way and expect to be successful. And same thing with labor. A lot of times they like to limit in hospitals food or drinks just in case you need to have surgery. So again, we're doing a one size fits all for everybody. And if you are not in a high risk, and if you are, if everything's going well, and there's no reason why you can't talk with your staff and your birthing team and talk to them about having some nutrition while you do it, or put that on your birth plan. That's what I did. I found a really great template for all of these things. And then I talked with it with my OB for our third baby. It was a VBAC after 2 C-sections. And so I had a midwife who happened to be my sister-in-law, and she was amazing. But then I had to have an OB, just hospital protocol, since I had 2 C-sections. And I think I was their first VBAC after 2 C-sections. So it was new for all of us. And their OB was amazing. And if anybody is pregnant in northern or central Minnesota, I would love to recommend that team to you. We drove an hour and a half for them, and they were well worth it, and we would do it again in a heartbeat. But I went through my birth plan with them prior, and we talked about if there was anything on my birth plan that they didn't feel they could accommodate. They brought that up, and we talked it through so we could be on the same page, rather than be blindsided. When you're giving birth, like, that's what you should be focused on. Your husband should be focused on the birth and not at, so often we have to be advocating for these things while we're in labor, or our husband has to get pulled away from our side to advocate for these things. So if you get those kind of worked out beforehand and make your things known, it just makes for a lot smoother process. Let's see here. Yeah, so not eating. I did the Ninja Red packets from Young Living. They're 2-ounce packets, and they're amazing. And so we actually went through a 30 pack of those in 2 days. So like, that's what we sustained ourselves on, and it was amazing, both my husband and I. And I think the biggest thing too, when it comes to making decisions, it is a family by family basis, and we shouldn't feel defensive if somebody makes a different choice than us. So we're all making the best choice for our families. And just because I'm making these choices doesn't mean I'm projecting that onto you. And it doesn't mean in a one-on-one conversation, if we're talking about this, that one of us needs to feel like we're wrong or made a wrong choice. Because there's no wrong choice in parenting. It's all the right choice. And we just make different choices. And so having grace for people, sometimes I do find another reason why I didn't feel all that comfortable talking about these things is sometimes people can get defensive if I just say, like, hey, we're cloth diapering. They tell me all these reasons why they don't cloth diaper. And I'm like, well, that's okay. You don't need to make these choices. And I'm not judging you for using disposable diapers. Like, that's your choice. Like, I don't. And so we just, need to show grace for people, not get defensive, and just be on that same page that we all want those healthy babies. And so once the babies are here, I wanted to touch on a little bit the guiding principles that we have in our home. So first and foremost, we believe in our house that God designed our bodies with an immune system for us to thrive. And that immune system works optimally when it's exposed and almost like practicing. Like, if we keep germs away from our bodies, that's not helping our immune system. We need germs. Germs are good. Fevers are good. That's how our bodies fight off. Like, we know we're getting a great response from our body by that fever. And not to say that a 107 fever is great, because of course there's always cause for concern on things, but a standard fever, as long as we monitor our kids if they have a bit of a spike. We're monitoring them constantly taking their temperature, making sure they have fluid intake. And as it does rise, we do cool their feet and we do cool their heads with washcloths, and we do those kinds of things. And we've never had huge fevers. We've never done fever reducers. We've never had to do an antibiotic for anything. We've actually, between all 3 kids, have been to a medical doctor 2 times total, and 1 time was for poison ivy, because again, we have a bunch of tools in our toolbox. We got poison ivy, we tried a couple things, it wasn't working, and we knew we needed to go in for a steroid. And it wasn't something we took lightly, but it was something we knew we needed to do. So we're not one to not seek medical attention if it's not warranted. It's, like I've said, it's just a tool in our toolbox, and it's kind of, it's up to us to decide where that is. So another thing we do with our kids, and the other time we were at the doctor total, was a fever issue, and we had a broken thermometer luckily, and it had said we had a really high fever, and it really wasn't as high as the thermometer said, but we went in just to make sure it wasn't. So all things were good there. And
what do you say when if your kids have a fever or aren't feeling well, how do you take or talk to them about it at home?
Yeah, so another big thing that we do is we don't talk about being sick. We don't say like, oh, you're sick, you need to go lay down, you need to go do this, you're sick. Instead, we say more positive language like, your body is working so hard, you need to go lay down and rest because your body's fighting off all those bad germs. Like, this is all good stuff. And like the way that we present it to them isn't that illness is a bad thing, because it's not a bad thing. Illness is a part of life, and our goal is not for our kids to never get sick. It's so that we expose them. They're exposed to the things that they need to be exposed to. Their body works the way God designed their body to work, and that it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and can fight off things. When we rarely do get illnesses in our home, and when we do, it might be a sniffle that lasts a day, or we have had influenza come through our home a couple times, and out of our family of 5, one person has gotten it, and it lasted for like 2 days. And so I'm not saying that in a gloating or a boastful way by any means, just like we just treat it a little bit differently, and it shows that works for us. Might not work for everybody, but for us it definitely does.
How old are your kids?
We have a 5-year-old, an almost 3-year-old, and an almost 1-year-old.
And then you've also said, like you said, you didn't use antibiotics, but what else have your kids not had that seems to be quite common?
Right. None of our kids have ever had an ear infection, and that one alone is pretty rare. And again, that's not coming from a spot of demeaning or saying, wow, we're awesome. That's just coming from a standard perspective of, like, when I talk to people, it's very rare that somebody has not experienced an ear infection or multiple ear infections in their children. So yeah, we've never had an ear infection. We don't have any allergies or asthma or eczema, or any of those things that seem a little bit more prevalent these days. And yeah, another thing that we do watch is food dyes. We've noticed our kids don't get a lot of processed foods, but we notice, and our extended family notices, that when they have food dyes, especially like even strawberry milk that has red 40 in it, they're off the walls crazy, hitting people, just ridiculous things that is not their standard behavior. And so it's noticed a lot more since they don't have it, that we can see it when they do, and how it doesn't agree with their bodies. And so we try to keep that stuff away from them even more.
And I think when you were talking about delivery and all of that, you had mentioned that you declined the vitamin K shot, but you also declined other things as well.
Yeah. Yep. We pretty much declined everything. That's where, when we talk about our birth plan, it pretty much was just the word no, because across the board, nothing. We just, again, feel like our babies are born with everything that they need. And even another more controversial topic, or something that we don't talk about too much, is circumcision. And again, that's definitely a family choice and a personal choice. And something that we talked in length about, and we declined. Our thought, I guess, was that was someone else's body, and that wasn't our choice to make for him. And so that's what we chose at that point. But yeah, otherwise, Hep B is another thing that's administered in the first day or two. We declined that one. The only thing, I guess, that we did do was we allowed that heel prick, and even that, it was like a little uneasy, just because you have this brand new baby, and then we're poking their skin. It just seemed painful and unnecessary at that time. And of course we do like hearing tests, but that's about it. Another thing that we do also decline during pregnancy is the amnio test. And I guess I don't even know when or if they do that to everybody. But yeah, we declined that as well. I'm trying to think if there's any other.
How about are you doing the well child visits, all of that stuff?
Yeah, we don't do well visits. We establish care right away. And then we monitor them again, we feel like as their parents that we would know if they're feeling ill, or if there's cause for concern, if they're seeming off in any way, even if it's not an illness type thing, like if their behavior seems off or if something seems strange, we feel confident that we're the experts in them. And I'm not as concerned about like what percentile they're in, height and weight, they're healthy kids. So that part of it doesn't concern me and the same thing with the milestones. Sometimes I even just look up, because you can just Google the CDC milestones for certain ages. And so I'll look and see, oh, okay, by this age they should be stacking 4 blocks. I can determine that. Like, I don't need to take them to somebody else to ask me that question. Like, I can run down the checklist, and then if I'm concerned about any development issues, which I've never been, I can bring them to somebody. We do have a naturopath in Bemidji that we do establish for our primary care physician, and do well checks with her if we do ever, when we do want to establish care, just to create that baseline relationship. Otherwise, we've never had a cause for concern. We've never had, I think it just comes back to, you could have all the degrees the world has to offer, and you're still not going to be an expert on individual people's families. You're going to be an expert in your field, but people are so different. And that's what I always think too, like back to the percentiles, what's the average height and weight for a 35-year-old woman? Like, well, I don't know. Like, we don't compare adults that way. Why would we say that?
That's a good point.
That 3-year-old's a little bit short. Like, that's okay. Like, as long as they're not like overweight and unhealthy to an unhealthy extent, or things like that. But you're gonna know as the parent, like, hey, we need to remedy this. So
cool.
But I think that was all. That was my goal, just to empower. If one person walks away from this video and just asks questions for their own family, that is a success. So I hope somebody got something out of this. And just evaluating those risks and benefits for everything for your family. And they're going to be different than what we talked about. You're going to have different concerns and different things going on. And that's up to you and your spouse and your family to make those decisions. And we just need to get back to trusting the family unit and not relying on experts to tell people what to do with their families.
And I'll just add, and I know with horses, like the healing barn movement is the same, getting back to basics, I don't put anything on or in their bodies that has side effects. But doing your research beforehand so you feel confident with the decisions you're making makes it very easy to decline and give a one-word answer, no, and not feel like you have to argue or prove to a professional why you're making a decision. So if you go in having done the research, and I think Kellie brought up some really good points of choices that she made. So those are things, if you're in the same boat or the same situation, you could do your research before you go in. You can reach out to her so that when you get into a situation, I don't think waiting until you're about to have a baby to have a conversation with a medical professional would probably end up in your favor if you didn't have your ducks in a row before you go in.
Exactly.
So maybe prep, obviously she's a research-aholic, and it's great to do that. Like, the more we know, the better choices we can make. So knowing the situations you're going to be put into, having your answers before you go there makes it really easy to decline anything that you're not comfortable with.
And you can always do things at other times too. If you don't feel comfortable right now with the information you have, or if you go to an appointment and from anything, if you're a vet or your medical doctor or eye doctor, it doesn't matter who, like if they recommend something and you're not comfortable that day, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not comfortable right now. Can you give me some more information? I'm going to go home and do some research, and then I'll let you know at our next appointment. So unless it's like an emergency situation, most of that stuff you have a little bit of time to dig into and look into.
Cool.
All right.
Wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hope everyone enjoyed our information, and As always, reach out to either one of us if you have questions. We will post some resources in the comments, some really good books and different things that we've read to, if you're looking for something, you can be directed in a certain spot to start you on your journey and see where it takes you in your own research. So have a good night.
Bye.